today. I know it was a last-minute addition on the back of the panel that just happened. So happy to give a bit of an overview on Medopad. I'm Martha Carruthers. I lead the life science vertical within Medopad. I joined the company about 8 months ago now. And the past 18 months have been quite transformational for Medopad and really started in late 2017. And the top mention there happened in the Q3 earnings call of 2017, where Tim Cook mentioned Medopad and some of the work we were doing based here in London. And subsequently, we closed our Series A funding in February of last year, so that was 28 million. And at the same time, our CEO, Dan Vedat, was on a trade mission with Theresa May to China. And although we'd had some relationships in China for quite some time, that really led to a step change in those relationships. So with the likes of Tencent, Ping An, China Resource Group overall. And then the last pieces of which we've started to target the US market overall, acquisition of Sherbet in the US, which has allowed us some relationships into hospitals there, and then also some of the capabilities that they have. So overall, as a company, what we're trying to achieve is a pretty big vision and mission. And you may have seen and heard Dan talk about that we want to touch 1 billion lives, and we know that that's not going to happen in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. This is a huge ambition, and we are absolutely committed to trying to do that. So how do we allow people to live longer, to prosper for the years that they're alive, hopefully allowing them to not deteriorate with whatever disease they may encounter, and lead more towards prevention overall as well. And Dan was really inspired through the likes of Carl Gauss and thinking, how these great minds do such amazing work, but then we lose these individuals so early. So what could he commit to as an individual, and consequently our company commit to, and the full team into really transforming that and allowing individuals to spend time with loved ones, make a personal contribution, make an academic contribution as well. So where the company started was in 2011 and taking images, MRI images onto iPads, and hence the name Medopad, and pivoted about 4 years ago to focus towards remote patient monitoring, where a lot of value is lost for patients. So you can have the best EMR, EHR within the four walls of the hospital, but actually where a patient spends 95% of their time, how are we capturing that data? And the answer is we're not doing that very well. And then what type of data are you capturing? So how do we get objective data that can influence treatment decisions and ultimately management of patients overall? So that really led to this focus around remote patient monitoring and how do we support clinical teams in making the best decisions possible. So the product, it consists of a care team portal or a care team view, and then a patient-facing application. And the way that it would work for any given disease state, so take heart failure as an example, the cardiologist would ask the patient to download the Medopad app. They would have a specific code that would link them into then their clinic overall and allow that connection between their cohort of patients into that clinical care team, where through the dashboard they can see the progress of the patient over the coming months, and also inform when they come back in for clinic visits overall. Now, how do we do that? How do we make something that works across a multitude of disease states so we're not dedicated to just one specific area? We don't have a solution that we pull off the shelf for diabetes or for surgery. We really work to understand the problem. Once we understand the problem and the requirements, it's then a matter of looking at what modules are going to be relevant. So think about modules as simple applications. So it could be blood pressure tracking, medication tracking, 6-minute walk tests, PROMS questionnaires, et cetera, et cetera. And those are essentially the Lego pieces that we say, take the Lego pieces and put those together. And by no means would we suggest that a patient would have 100 different modules that they're seeing. It would be 6 to 10 that are really relevant to that disease state. Then the second piece is around the integrated devices and integrating with, Apple Watch, other activity trackers, then connected blood pressure cuff, weight scale, et cetera. And then the third piece is around content. And we know even hospitals separated by half a mile will have different content that they want to share with patients overall. So how do you bespoke that down to the hospital level where they can share information from patient advocacy group, information that's specific to the clinic, the disease state, et cetera. And so these three verticals really coming together to create quite a unique experience for the patient. Then the disease states that we've worked in overall. So we started working in rare conditions, and that was really because we based the premise of building the product around working with London teaching hospitals. And where there was a big unmet need was in a lot of rare conditions. And for a couple reasons, because patients are having to travel long distances, usually to one or two major centers in any given country. And secondly, because they're typically not well funded overall. So I'll go through an example of one of those cases in a second. How we've built the business over time, so truly working with healthcare systems and with clinicians to start with. And I think all of us believe that if you're solving a true problem that affects and is a major issue for clinical teams, for hospitals, and for patients, then the rest of these verticals really follow on from that. So as you gain success through working with healthcare systems, that leads into life science companies saying, okay, there's a few of our KOLs that are really seeing this to be quite valuable to their business overall. How do we continue to build that and scale that more broadly? Then that leads into the third vertical around population health, so be that governments or large insurers that become interested in managing even a larger cohort of patients and starting to think about how can they use that data to inform, again, picking up early deterioration of patients and ultimately, hopefully, towards prevention as well. And then the fourth vertical is more of a pull from these groups than a push from our side. So employee well-being is important. A project that we did with Volkswagen was focused towards their fleet drivers and where safety is of critical importance. So sleep, diet tracking, et cetera, is important. And then working with several different institutions as well. You see Chelsea Football Club there. We're looking at player efficiency and then also from a fan engagement perspective as well. So to walk you through then just a couple examples into how easy it is to bring the different modules together. So this is for a condition called DIPG, which is a rare pediatric cancer. And in the screen on the left, you see 5 different modules that are selected here. So daily check-in, medication tracking, etc. And what was unique to this instance was having the video module where parents could capture a video of their child doing some basic movements on a daily basis overall. Because typically the patients would need to come back into hospital to be monitored throughout their treatment, when essentially you could be collecting that through video, uploading it in real time to the clinical team to see if there were any major issues. If there were, they can bring them back into hospital. If not, avoiding the travel, the stress, etc., for both the parent and the child. And importantly, the contextual information around some of the symptoms, the questionnaires, etc., that are included into that. And then the last screen shows then some of the content that can be included into the Learn section. So for instance, in this area, patients have a port that's implanted for their treatment. So infection prevention is important and just some general education overall. The second example is a project that we worked on with the Royal Free originally and then subsequently with Actelion. And the key piece here was understanding that having visibility into how a patient is doing between their appointments that are every 6 months is critically important to picking up early signs of deterioration. So typically they would be seen in hospital every 6 months. They may deteriorate a lot within that period of time, but you have no measure of picking that up. So we co-developed the 6-minute walk test to be done remotely. So you could consider that to be a digital biomarker. With the University of Göttingen in Germany, they presented that at the European Cardiology Society meeting in August of last year, and it's just been accepted for publication in the past couple of weeks. And in combination with doing the 6-minute walk test overall remotely on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, with again some of the contextual information around the drug adherence, then questionnaires around frustration with breathlessness and some of those quality of life measures, it gives a complete view of the patient, and then also supporting with the Learn section, so that when a patient goes back into the hospital and the question of how have you been for the last 6 months, you then have something to refer to and really gives an informed discussion. And the third example is looking at a diabetic population, and that's really looking at the totality of this patient group. And obviously a few more modules included here because of the complexity of managing diabetes overall. Drug adherence being important. The third screen is showing the dashboard element where, again, the patient can see those different variables being compared over time that the clinical team would also see. And then the opportunity to add content, be that from support groups, patient advocacy groups, or at a governmental level. The other piece that we like to really mention is around how you make digital technology part of a standard of care. So it's nice if a digital tool is on the side and it's being utilized by patients or perhaps by clinicians. However, if it's not embedded into the workflow, embedded into the pathway overall, it will remain a nice-to-have digital tool. So becoming part of the standard of care overall into the way patients are managed and treated is important to what we're aiming to do. And part of that also then starts to take us into the thinking around digital therapeutics, digital biomarkers, and how you can start to embed that, not necessarily replacing medicinal therapy, but complementing medicinal therapy and being that adjunctive digital solution. Then we know we have a big ambition. So touching 1 billion lives, I think, is a pretty big ambition. And we know that we can't do this alone and we can't be the best at everything. And, we're very humble as an organization to know that we need to partner with the best in the world. And so part of that is looking at who are the world-class, partners that we want to work with. And we've been very fortunate to be partners with Apple and their MPP program overall. Then with Tencent, a very strong relationship, and I'll come on to some of the work that we're doing with them as well. Top academic institutions internationally, and some of our, key partners as well from, the life science and medtech world as well. In addition, there's a really important piece around partnership and thinking about the platform that enables us to become more of that healthcare ecosystem. So what we like to say is that no patient, if you're a diabetic patient, you don't want to have 10 apps to manage your diabetes. You want to have one place to go that's going to bring everything together for you. And that's truly our ambition. So we'll continue to build modules overall, and in conjunction with Apple where that is necessary. But then we will also look into what is necessary to bring into the platform overall through the best third parties out there. And to give you an example of that, Tissue Analytics is a company that does sizing of wounds and looks at the tissue healing overall. So it was raised through a photo module that we had. Great that you're capturing photos, but it'd be nice to see the wound healing overall and to be able to assess that. So thinking about bringing these partners, and then you would see it not as a patient, the different supporters of the modules overall, but you would have a very clean, succinct experience from a patient perspective. Then the whole notion around data, I think you've probably heard a lot in the last couple of days around data and how important that is and what we do with the data, but using that in a very smart way to look at the deterioration of patients. So how can we collect those objective measures while patients are outside the hospital setting to then pick up early signs of deterioration and ultimately, hopefully, predict and prevent complications developing overall. So that's really where our work has started with Tencent, and focusing towards challenges that we see, in particular in Parkinson's disease, is the first area that we're focused towards. So through capturing the videos of patients, we're able to automatically assign a UPDRS score for people with Parkinson's and then compare that over time. So the algorithm has been trained. We are currently, we've started the clinical trials here with King's College here in London, and then are expanding our secondary sites into China. And you can imagine the use cases for this and being able to look at how a patient is deteriorating, thinking about as well from moving up earlier potentially into a diagnostic phase. And we know that from a population health level, this is going to be a challenge across multiple geographies and healthcare systems overall. So just to conclude that we have a huge ambition as a company. We want to allow individuals to live longer, higher quality of life during those years, and ultimately to make the best contribution that they can make overall. Thank you.